Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, it was a little while ago now, but there was a couple months ago when I made a video called, It Might Not Be Your Tactics. And we're going to do a little bit of a follow up on that. I would definitely say in our case here with Mars FC, it definitely is not the tactic. But first of all, a little bit of a note. There's a lot of people who like to look for information, videos, and other things on Football Manager tactics. It makes sense to me, right? Tactics are kind of the sandbox part of the game. I know it's not a full sandbox. People ask for that, want a lot more customization, but it gives you like at least a little bit of a sandbox. You can play around with it, do crazy stuff, and all of that. However, tactics are not really always that well explained in the game or even by different content creators. And so as a result, you have people looking around for different tactics and for tactical advice and for stuff like that can help out. I'm not the expert on tactics, right? The reason why I say this is largely because I myself am not very knowledgeable about the best way to run Football Manager tactics. But I'll show you a couple of things that I've learned as we've moved along. So this is the tactic that we have set up. As you can see, we do have two players who are suspended. Sayuting, as I said earlier this morning, is suspended because of the yellow card. So is Kader Bamba. That's a shame because Bamba's got 3 goals and really is a superstar there in the back. But yeah, he's suspended. He can't get that many yellow cards. And so we'll see how we do missing 2 of our key center backs. But at any rate, what I want to tell you about this tactic is that there's nothing really special about it. There is no so-called exploit. I read this all the time, right? Oh, you use a download tactic. Well, it's a tactic that's exploiting the system, right? Somebody created this tactic knowing that there's some sort of bug in this year's version of the game or whatever the current version is, and they exploit that specific thing. It is true that there are tactics that are created and that are heavily tested to try to take advantage of difficulty that the game has. But even when you use those tactics, at least in my experience, you have to worry about your personnel and worry about the guys that you're putting out there. That's why I say that tactics aren't everything. There are other things that are important as well. This tactic uses none of those exploits. It's a tactic that sort of makes sense, as I've explained in the past. We have 3 defenders who have a higher line. Let's see, where are we here? Out of possession, much higher defensive line. So the defensive line ends up being really around here. We have a sweeper keeper who can play in place of those defenders in theory. Now, Lichaba is not the best sweeper keeper in the world, so it doesn't always work that well. We got 2 wingbacks here. We're using wingbacks instead of guys up in the middle because we want to be able to have them have an easier time getting back to try to help out with these 3 defenders. Hasn't worked that much. We know that. We have a defensive midfielder who in theory will also come back here. That definitely hasn't worked out. And then we have Linguanda, who's really an attacking player, but not playing in a midfielder role. He's playing a little bit further back to sort of fool and decoy the defense. That has worked really well. Linguanda has had a number of very, very incisive, I guess we would call it, a number of very demoralizing for the opposition passes that cut the defense open. And the reason why is because he is able to hold back just a little bit more, and he can confuse the defenders who are playing up here. And then, of course, we have these 2 as our attacking players, and then Silla, who's kind of backing up and trying to feed the ball to either whoever plays striker. Right now, Chen Haowei and Ndaya. So that's the way that it works, and it's a pretty basic system. We don't do anything that's really bizarre. I do know that the Segundo Volante rule is something that the computer manager has a hard time to deal with, which is why we use it, right? So I know about that. Nothing else here is really like, oh yeah, we're going to totally like screw the system apart and like make it so that, whatever. I mean, none of that thought went into this. We just put something together that made sense and it works. And you wonder, so how in the world does it work? Well, there's a couple of things you need to think about. Number one thing to think about is always your personnel, but I'm not going to go to the squad screen. I've done that before. We're going to go over here to competitions, and this is where you'll see what our personnel is really like. We can look at each of them one-on-one, one by one, but it doesn't mean anything because you have to have the right context. And the way to get the right context is over here in the season preview screen, and this is where you can see that we're picked to win the league. We have 1 to 10 odds to win the league, so we probably will. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players in the Media Dream 11. Right, and as you can see, this is pretty small on your screen, but 1, 2, 3 of those I have thoroughly scouted for. Fang Lipeng also has the little flag, and I think that, yes, he does too. Chikatra also has a little flag. So I scouted all 5 of those other players just in case, and no, they're not good enough to play on our team. And you can see it's the same thing here when we look at the key players. I scouted everybody. I wanted to know who everybody is and whether we have a chance of getting them or not. And we might have a chance of getting some of these guys, but we're just simply not going to. And the reason why is because we want to stay away from guys who don't like big matches or who are not consistent. If our own players turn out to be inconsistent or to not like big matches, then we kick them out and we go find someone else. Right? That's basically how it works. So in addition to having a tactic that works well, we go out and we get players. My philosophy is to get players who will play in my tactic. I don't believe in having having the players first and then making the tactic around the players. I do the opposite. I want to create a tactic that I think will work, that makes sense to me, and then go out and get those players and get good players, right? You can do it both ways. The other way works fine as well, but I like doing it this way. So that's the theory that goes into it. That's number one. You got to have the players. If you have the players, you can make a bad tactic work fairly well, provided that it makes sense, right? If your tactic has like a one striker, everybody else is playing defense on the defend role, playing way behind the midfield line, it's not going to work. Of course, it's not going to work, right? If you only have a goalie back there, everybody else is attacking, that's not going to work either, right? That can be hard to know. We'll try to get into this as we go into future videos, assuming I finally have time again in my life to do reading. But once I'm able to sort of dig in a little bit and take a look at what others especially have said on the subject, we can go through and learn what is written in some of these books. I'm thinking about books by guys like Jonathan Wilson, some books that are fairly well known, et cetera, et cetera. We can go through and read and understand a few things from these books and try to understand sort of the metagame and the theory behind this, right? But there are reasons why you don't want to have a team of nothing but strikers or a team of nothing but defenders. Neither approach will work. So that's number one. You want to have, well, first of all, a tactic that works, that makes sense. You want to have players who can play in the tactic. And then finally, the thing that everybody gets wrong is you need to have good dynamics, right? Look, we have good dynamics. We do have one unhappy player at the club. Actually, we have two. We have one of the under 18s who's happy, who's never going to see game time. Let's see if I can show you him. That's this guy, Lee Han, who I brought him on. He wanted to start in the first team right away, which he's just simply not ready for it. So he got upset and has been upset the whole time, and he's just not going to get any game time. He shouldn't be upset with me. He didn't get game time at Hangyuan either. So something with him, not with us. And the other one who's unhappy, of course, is Chen Qianliang, who's upset because I haven't been starting him. I actually might start starting him a little bit here because of how poorly Yan Liming has been playing. So watch out for him. We might end up starting him. Nobody cares. And the reason why is because we have good team cohesion. This was really poor when we brought in a whole bunch of players. That usually happens. And it got good over time because we won games and because we didn't have any major problems or catastrophes in the club, right? Good managerial support, right? Haven't been at the club long, but everything else is good. And the atmosphere is actually fairly good. It went down a little bit, even though we won 5-1. I wouldn't look too much into that. Trying to play that look at this every game type game is like trying to look at the stock returns every day, right? Or trying to watch a pot of water to see if you can force it to boil. It's not going to happen, right? It's not a good idea. And we also have a very well-defined hierarchy. This is kind of what you want. You want to have team leaders. You want to have a bunch of highly influential players, probably more influential players than this, and then try not to have necessarily so many other players. Now, if you go along, you don't have a whole ton of squad changes because you know who you want to have on your squad. This will sort itself out automatically, right? So you don't have to do much to change that. You don't have to go intervene and stuff. Same thing with these social groups. These guys will eventually move in, and if they won't, I mean, it'll be obvious that they're just totally outsiders and whatever. Not everybody's going to love you. Not everybody's going to be friends with everyone else. Right? And that's what you do. That's how you make it happen. Or that's how you make it happen. And that's how you make guys happy. So that's basically what the idea here is behind the tactic and behind getting things to work. Right? There are a couple of other things you can do to sort of keep the dynamics good. If you have a player who's destroying your dynamics, take him off your first team, put him on the reserves or on the under 18s or whatever, even if he's too old and can't be registered on that team. And the reason why is because that helps keep his negative influence away from your other players. Right? And if he really raises a fuss, just sell him. I don't care how good he is. I don't care if he's the best player in the world. You can always figure out some way around not having that player, and you can always do something else to avoid having him completely destroy cohesion in your dressing room, right? There's no excuse. You don't want to hold on to players who don't want to be there. right? And that's pretty much it, right? If you focus on those things, you got a tactic that makes sense and that theoretically could work. You got players who can play the tactic and you have good dynamics, you'll be fine. I mean, you'll be fine in Football Manager and it'll be a lot of fun. I would argue that you could probably do it even with a defensive tactic or with a counter-attacking tactic, the stuff that people say don't work. I bet you can make it work. You might have to do a little bit of research, find out what other people have done ahead of you to make that sort of tactic work. But I bet it could happen. Might be fun to play around with. Anyway, there you have it. Remember, it's about the tactic, yeah, but it's not all about the tactic. And you don't want to put too much stock into getting the tactic that's magic, that does everything. You need to put in your own effort as well. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.